Hi students, welcome to HSC Earth and Environmental Science and Module 8, Resource Management. This is video number 15 and the last in our little series on waste management. This little section of videos has been about evaluating the sustainability of a named waste management option, and in this example we're going to talk about demand for reused or recycled waste. In the context that we've been looking at, we've been thinking about landfill and how we try and minimize some of the materials that are going into current landfill and how we manage landfill so that it isn't creating additional problems for the environment. So in this final video, we're going to have a little bit of a look at some of the strategies that have been used by one particular organization in order to try and increase the demand for reused or recycled waste. As we think about this last section, we want to look at a case study. The importance of case studies is that they are easily remembered, so you can write about them in an HSC exam. So local examples are always the best because they're the ones you're going to be most familiar with. This is one example, and it's one from a place that I used to spend a bit of time around, and a place in fact where I grew up, which is around the Terry Hills region or Ingleside region of Sydney on the northern beaches, and we're going to be looking very specifically in this particular video at the Kimbriki tip site. As I said, I suggest that you look at a particular case study for your own local area, but just in case you can't find any material, the Kimbriki waste management is a really nice example to fit into this last category around demand for wastes. So I guess what we want to do is have a little bit of a look at Kimbriki's history. Kimbriki was originally established as a landfill site in 1974. Now this was a tip. Basically, this was nothing much more than a hole in the ground where a whole heap of garbage just got dumped in. So it didn't have the seals that we expect now on sanitary landfills. There was no attempts made to really limit the amount of garbage that was being dumped at the tip, and certainly no attempt to recycle materials. Basically, everything just went there, just got buried, and really not buried very much, just a little sprinkling. We didn't really understand as much about waste management as we do these days. We certainly didn't have the same attitude to wastes that we do now. The population was smaller, and so the amount of waste that was being generated was less as well. And in 1974, there was still a fair amount of material that was recycled anyway. That is, material which, if it was breaking down, was fixed, repaired, and renewed. It wasn't just thrown away. We weren't quite at the age of the single-use disposable items. And so therefore, it was probably okay, at least in one sense, for us to use this particular area as landfill. It was operated as an unincorporated business, and it had several of the councils working together, or at least representatives who formed a committee to manage this particular site. That included Manly, Mossman and Warringah councils as they were back in the 1970s. In 1989-90, the resource recovery operations commenced on the site, and Kimbriki became a recycling and waste disposal centre. So this is a really nice couple of ticks in this particular section, because this is 30 years ago, and already Kimbriki was starting to forge ahead as a waste management recycler, as an organisation that was starting to try and create demand for waste. In 2009, the Kimbriki Environmental Enterprises Proprietary Limited was created to own and operate the site, with the councils as shareholders. And by this stage too, there was an additional council, the Pittwater Council, that was also part of the management group associated with this. But in 2016, we saw a number of New South Wales Government Council mergers. So some super councils, if you like, being created, partly to try and address some of the issues associated with massive duplication in governance. And so the resulting Northern Beaches Council now pretty much took in most of the area from Palm Beach in the north through across the Spit Bridge into just a little bit of Mossman. So it was massive, and that Northern Beaches Council was now the majority shareholder in this venture. Mossman retained a small proportion of that shareholding. Today, when we talk about the Kimbriki site, we're talking about a centre of excellence for environmental services. This is waste generation, community education, efficiency, around reducing the amount of landfill and also a massive increase in resource recovery. So there's a number of things that Kimbriki has been specifically targeting in the last few years in order to try and address some of these really important issues around waste management. Less than 2 million tonnes of waste has been diverted from landfill at Kimbriki through the resource recovery operations on site, and this of course continues to increase, and probably by the time I talk to you it'll now be over 2 million tonnes of waste. And this is the important thing about creating a demand for waste, because anything that is going away from the landfill reduces the amount that we put into landfill. And as we know, this is just trying to bury things in the ground. There's only so much land that you can keep doing that with before it becomes a major issue. It's probably worth having a little bit of comparison over the past 20 odd years, and of course we've continued to get more values since then, so it would be interesting to sort of predict the trends and then see if you can find some figures from the last year in order to see just how these numbers continue. What's really important, of course, is the amount of garbage that's actually being delivered to the site, which over a 20-year period was going down. With a population that's increasing, that's pretty impressive, that you can actually reduce the amount of garbage that's going into the site. So that tells you there's something happening around recycling for a start. But then what's really most exciting about the sort of stuff that's going on at Kimbriki is this massive drop in the amount that's actually going into landfill. So the amount of stuff that is being recovered, repurposed, reused, recycled has significantly increased from virtually nothing when we look back to 1990 up to about 3/4 of the material that's now being received. So this is massive. This is a huge change in the way that waste is managed at this particular site. And this is not unique nor unusual for a lot of the waste management sites that are operated all around the state and I guess all around the country. There's been a real push to try and understand exactly how much waste we are generating, how much we could potentially recycle, and to put some actions in place in order to try and manage this waste and reduce the amount that's actually ending up in landfill. Some of Kimbriki's important activities then are around the sorts of things that we would expect to be part of our recycling. So containers and bottles and cardboard and paper. There are lead acid batteries that also get recycled, and obviously there's some serious concerns around lead. We know that the dangers associated with lead in the environment, lead in the soil, lead in the water. So these are managed very, very carefully. Motor oil usually is something that is contained, collected and contained. But then Kimbriki's been involved in charity toy repairs, clothing collections, a range of different types of computer and TV recycling. A lot of people who upgrade their TVs just want the latest OLED and don't necessarily have a problem with their previous TV. They just want something a bit newer. And so there's nothing wrong with the TV that they're throwing away, other than that they don't want it anymore. And so these are the sorts of things, and of course computer hardware, peripherals, all of these sorts of things can also be cleaned up and resold. Australian Native Landscapes is also an organisation that partners and operates vegetation and wood waste recycling. So they produce, as we've talked about in other videos, they can take a lot of the organic matter, a lot of the green waste, and turn that into materials which can then be sold for fertilizers, top dressing, all of those sorts of things. Kimbriki has an on-site buyback centre, so for things like furniture or building materials, these are also things that are part of the increased demand for waste. And then there's concrete recyclers as well. So there's partnerships there with a lot of the construction companies in order to use some of that concrete that gets dug up from time to time when new foundations and things are being put in. And that can be used for, obviously it's going to be reprocessed, then used for road base, for aggregates, for sands, all sorts of different purposes. So Kimbriki is really a nice example of when we're looking at demand for waste, about an organisation that's thought about their waste management to the point that they're now able to create not just an alternate route for a lot of the material that comes in and that might naturally have ended up in landfill, but to actually create a business where people know that this is a place that they can go, they can find bargains, they can find quality material at a good price. It's not new, but it allows access to materials at reasonable prices. That means that we get some recycling, repurposing. So remember, we're always thinking about that waste management hierarchy, and we're trying to get away from the dispose down here at the sort of tip of this inverted pyramid. We want to stay up here with our repurpose, reuse, recycle, all of that sort of thing. Avoid the throwing away in the first place. So this is where we want to stay up here. This is the key area of our waste hierarchy that we want to try and work with, and creating extra demand for waste that enables it to be repurposed and recycled is a really effective way of combating the problems of waste. That pretty much covers the section that we wanted to look at in waste management. So there's just one section left in our Module 8 on resource management, and that's sustainability. And we'll have a look at that in the next video. Thanks for watching.